So, merge tayo ngayon ulit with 3 blocks, 2A, 2B, and 2C. So, we will continue on our lecture na stop natin dito sa sustainability last time. So, I hope okay yung PowerPoint. You can see it clearly. So, we will just have this short continuation. And then later on, after this lecture, I will give you the activity 2. So, for the seniors na medyo late or kaka-add ko lang din sa Google Classroom. So, please visit the Google Classroom so that you can view the activity 1 there. I posted that last week. So, I hope you can comply on that. And then, yun, next yung activity 2, mamaya i-discuss ko siya. Okay? So, let's go back to sustainability. So, last time we discussed some of the parts of the introduction of environmental science, and this is where we stop. Okay? Also dun sa sustainable development goals. So, sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So, we keep on discussing, we keep on mentioning about how to sustain the resources of an environment. So, masasabi mo lang siyang sustainable if and only if it can meet the needs of the present population without using too much resources na ang ending is nakakompromise yung um, ability ng future generation to sustain their own needs as well at a given time kung kailan man sila darating, di ba? So, ang role ng mga population or ng group of organisms residing in that area and that given present time is to use well the resources in order to have that sustainability as maintained. Okay? So, we will discuss the components of sustainability or kung ano yung mostly talaga na composed in an environment in order for it to have that sustainable type of area or society or environment. So first we have the natural capital. So the natural capital is composed of resources and then services. Okay? So natural resources plus natural services equal the natural capital. Okay? So here in this slide, you can see that the natural capital is commonly used or overused, I think, in a way of human activities or the human population do their activities in a way that they consume renewable resources faster than the nature can replenish it or renew them. So example of that is the clearing of mature forest much faster than they replace it or they can grow back. Okay, syempre, nagputol ka ng 10 puno and nagtanim ka ng 10 or kahit 20 pa yan, but they will take time to grow as much as that mature forest na na-cut down. So, clearly, okay, nagiging problema ito because, okay, why I am discussing this because last time we mentioned or we take time to recognize the environmental problems. Okay, so for natural capital, okay, since naturally it is given by the nature or environment to us, okay, we recognize how these problems arise. Okay, so another example is eroding topsoil faster than the nature can renew it. Okay, so because of that flooding, okay, ano rin yung cause ng flooding, so lahat yan merong ripple effect. So mas mahirap. Okay, and then we also harvest many species of ocean organisms. So we have those fish, okay, na mas mabilis nating nakukonsume kaysa sa pag replenish nila sa sarili nila because of course they grow, okay, the eggs grow, into mature organism, and it will take time. Okay? So we tend to solve this by looking for solutions. So very ironic, right? You consume this much and then you recognize the problem that it caused, and then iisip ka rin ng solution para mas maayos ulit siya, and then consume again. Okay. So we have the natural resources. So this is the materials and energy coming from the nature. Okay, natural siyang binibigay ng environment or ng kalikasan that are essential and useful to human for their survival. So these natural resources are classified into renewable and then non-renewable. Okay, I know you already know this, but we will just go through it so that we can connect things and then we can relate how these topics are important in order to understand, okay, environmental science. Okay. Of course, you know the renewable and the non-renewable. So the name itself, for non-renewable, these are resources that cannot be renewed again. While the renewable, these are resources na nare-replenish pa and then can be continually utilized. So here are examples of renewable and non-renewable resources. So top of that, you can see which are those resources na mas nakokonsume or mas nagagamit. So you have the biomass and then petroleum. So for renewable, you have biomass, hydropower, geothermal, then you wind, solar energy. For the non-renewable, okay, you have the examples of petroleum, natural gas, coal, and so on. Okay? So, as mentioned, we have natural services. So, in order to form the natural capital, okay, we have services and resources. So, for services, these are natural processes in nature that are happening with or without our presence or with or without our recognition, they are happening. Okay? Kahit hindi nakita ng mga mata natin lagi, so they are naturally happening in our environment. So example of these services is purification of air and then water, which are very important to support life and human economies. So part of these services is the nutrient cycling. So why it is very important or vital for the nature? Because in the environment, of course, nutrients are important in order to support the growth and development of organisms and so much more. Okay, so we will just go through briefly of nutrient cycling, and then you can see most of the examples, not just examples, but the nutrient cycling processes that are happening in the environment. So this cycling is the circulation of chemicals necessary for life. So without this cycling, mas mahirap maging sustainable ang environment natin. So mas mahirap din mag-survive. So from the environment, so through organisms and back to the environment. So paulit-ulit siya na cycle. Okay, so here is an example of the soil, and then the nutrients are recycled, okay, here, and then back to the organism, and then absorbed by the plant, and then the dead organisms nutrient, okay, yung galing doon sa mga decomposed organisms, so balik ulit siya sa soil, and that kind of process. Okay, so here. So dead leaves, and then other animals, organisms, stages of soil, and then decompose, break down by bacteria or microorganisms, and then give nutrients. It's either to the trees or to another set of plants, and then it will grow, it will be eaten, and so on. So the cycle continues. So I hope you understand the nutrient cycling. So this is a natural service, okay, nasa environment. So talagang nangyayari siya. At somehow, we interrupt some of this cycling, di ba? So, pag may mga activities ang human na medyo nakaka-disrupt ng mga gandang processes. So, they prolong or either they disarrange these cycles kaya minsan mas mahirap yung pag-replenish ng mga resources. So, this diagram is taken from the environmental science ebook. Okay, I will be sharing to you soon that ebook. So, here you can see a diagram and then the natural resources and services are labeled so that you can identify properly. So, I hope you can see sa mga phones nyo or laptop, no? So, yung blue labeled, those are the natural resources that are available in the environment, given by the environment. We also have the orange. So, these are the processes or services that are available that are happening in the environment. So, example of resources, we have the air, water, the non-renewable, and then the renewable. We have the soil, the land, and then biodiversity or life. We also have the services like air purification, you have the climate control, the UV protection, water purification. We have also the waste treatment, population control, and so much more. So if ma-realize nyo, so these are the services that are very important na hindi kayang gawin ng tao. So example yung air purification. I mean, naturally, hindi kayang gawin ng tao for the whole environment. Kaya natin mag-purify ng air with those equipment na ilalagay lang sa house, air purifier and all. Pero, I mean, naturally, okay, this is done by the nature or the environment. Okay, I hope nakakasunod po. You can just ask if you have questions, okay? Okay, so here is the list. You can see the natural resources and then the services. Okay, so the air, the water, okay, the soil, land, and so much more. And then the services. So you have the air purification, you have the climate control, you have UV protection, purification treatment of waste and water, then food production, of course, and many more. Okay, so that is composing the national capital. Okay, so we have solutions. So last time we discussed or we just tried to recognize the environmental problems that are existing right now, the Earth, the world, okay, sa environment natin. So, yeah, ironically, of course, after we consume, after we manage to destroy the environment, unti-unti, nagkakaroon tayo ng solutions for that para ma-revive ulit, para ma-replenish ulit yung mga nakuhang resources and then consume again. Okay? So, scientific research, so we use this, diba? So, as engineers, okay, future engineers, we are recognized or we are being trained to at least somehow recognize the environmental problems so that we can contribute well. So, di ba, with our fields being studied, marami ding tayong ways to help. Okay? We tend to look for solutions, scientific solutions in areas that we are expert, okay, that we can contribute, that we know well, so that we can help the environment and then we can find solutions in order to at least lessen. Okay, kasi hindi natin may iwasan na meron tayong bad effect or pagkakamali sa pag-consume sa environment, but at least we can lessen and then we can slow down the damage na naibibigay sa environment. So, we create solutions for that. So, maraming science research na nakakatulong na sa environment as of now. And then we have political solutions. Okay, we have these processes, we have government policies, we have rules and regulations, mga local government units, di ba? Para at least magkaroon ng magandang environment, clean environment, magandang lugar para sa support ng survival ng community. Okay? We use rules and regulations and then mga patakaran para lang ma-regulate, okay? Hindi kasi siya pwedeng i-stop, like kunwari yung pagkuha ng mga trees, pero at least ma-regulate siya, okay? Kasi ngayon, di ba, pag wala kang mga permits and all, if hindi aware ang local government or the department uh, that is governing that, which is the DENR, okay, meron nahuhuli talaga kapag meron kang pag-disobey or pagsunod sa mga regulations na ini-implement, especially sa mga biodiverse areas, yung pagputol ng mga puno, lalo na yung mga mature na puno, okay, mahirap kasi silang palitan. So, we do that, okay? We have these processes. So, yun, maraming mga solutions and sana mas mapabilis din yung paggawa ng mga solutions para mas ma-renewed yung environment and then mas mailinis yung mga wastes na present sa environment ngayon. Okay, so that is our ultimate goal, di ba? So we have to have environmentally sustainable society para mas maganda yung way of living ng mga tao. Okay? Nakakasunod po ba? Basta you just ask if you have questions, okay? So we need this kind of society that can meet our current and future basic resource needs na fair and equitable without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs din. So that will be so unfair for the future generation if ngayon pala nakukonsume na natin yung dapat para sa kanila. Or nakukonsume na natin yung mga resources na pwede magbigay ng resources for them in the future. Okay? Okay. So, these three principles is part of the sustainability or the sustainable environment society. So we have the solar energy, you have the chemical cycling, which I discussed kanina, and then the biodiversity. Okay. So sustainability we have this reliance on solar energy. Why? Of course, we know that already because the sun gives the solar energy that is needed for the production of food, okay, for the survival of organisms, okay, and so much more. So without that, we cannot really survive, okay? You have the biodiversity, and this is very important uh, for an area to survive, okay? Because we need different types of species, and then it means you have different interactions happening in that ecosystem. Kasi kapag walang ganon, madaling ma-extinct kapag isang type of species lang sa isang lugar. So, the more na merong biodiversity, the more na mas maganda interaction, mas maganda yung ecosystem. Okay, so the chemical cycling. So, as mentioned kanina, okay, these are natural processes in order to recycle nutrients na kailangan ng mga halaman and then animals and then organisms to survive and reproduce. So this diagram is just a summary of how the solar energy is used by the environment. So of course, hindi 100% i-absorb ng Earth kasi kung ganun, useless na. Okay, mamamatay lahat ng organisms because of the too much temperature and too much energy. So we only absorb 51%. Okay, some are scattered in the atmosphere and then reflected back to the surface. Okay, the clouds in the atmosphere and even hanggang sa outer space. Okay, hindi siya lahat ginagamit. So, ayun. We will discuss that sa Pagdating natin sa climate change, okay, sa atmosphere, sa parts ng atmosphere. Okay, next is we have the biogeochemical processes. So, don't worry class, these are all pahapyaw. Okay, so we will not dig deep too much on terms, scientific terms, because this introduction lecture gives you hint on what are the topics to be discussed sa mga darating na linggo at buwan. Okay, so for nutrients that are mentioned in the cycling, so of course we need different elements, different quantities. So we have elements that are needed in large amounts, which are macronutrients, and then we also have those small amounts, which is for uh, not too much elements. Okay, so small amounts that are just needed, enough quantity. So example of that is iron, zinc, you have chlorine, and then iodine. Okay, so this is an example of nitrogen cycle. So lahat naman yan napagdaanan natin sa mga early science subjects natin before. So this is just a review of how it is really happening sa environment and bakit siya kailangan isama sa environmental science. So this shows you paano na replenish yung nitrogen supply sa environment. So yun, from the organism down to the bacteria that are fixing the decomposed or any materials na available sa soil, and then convert it into compounds or different compounds of substances that are useful already for other bacteria or other organism, and then they will use it differently, okay? And then back to the surface, and then back to the atmosphere, and then so on. Okay. Here is also a carbon cycle, kung paano siya umiikot sa environment. Okay. How it is consumed, and then babalik sa environment as waste, or paano siya kinukuha from the ocean, or it is stored in there and then diffused in the atmosphere. So, mga ganong cycles. Okay? Of course, the water cycle. Okay? Actually, lahat naman sila important na cycles. Okay? So this, you can see the evaporation, and then it will condense and then precipitate down to the mountains, streams. Then you can have the freshwater storage, and so on. Okay? The same here with the soil. Okay, the rocks. Okay, the formation of that. And paano siya nagagamit, paano siya store as sediments, and so on. So these are important cycles. Okay, so we at least review of the ecology. Syempre related dun sa Envi Science. Okay, so I will just go through with you this group of organisms or categories that is concerning the ecology. So organisms or species are grouped into this. So we have the organism, starting from organism. So it is any form of life, because these are very important for levels of organization sa isang ecosystem. Okay, so we have organism, and then group of organisms composing yung population. So population is a group of individuals of the same species. So dapat isa lang. Okay, in a given area at the same time. Community naman, these are composed of different populations. Okay? And then ecosystem. So mas maraming communities, it will compose na the ecosystem. So pag ecosystem, the species in that interacts with one another. So they benefit from each other. They use chemicals and physical factors around them. And then we have the ecosphere. Okay? Okay, so of course, the environment is composed of different factors. So you already have that community, that population, and all. We also have the abiotic components. Okay, so these are non-living things or non-living factors. So these are physical and chemical factors in the environment. So you have the sunlight, you have the temperature, you have wind, soil, and so much more. These are very important. Okay. Then you also have the biotic. So these living organisms can be grouped or classified into different um, categories. So depende siya kung siya yung nagpo-produce ng food or siya lang taga-consume. So we have producers and then consumers. So I know you already know this. Okay, so you will just having review of what is an ecosystem or ano yung nagko-compose sa kanya. Okay? Okay, so this diagram shows you a simple ecosystem. Okay, merong mas magagandang diagram, but this can already be a simple diagram. So we have the sun giving enough energy to the plants, collects the energy so that they can produce food through photosynthesis. Okay, they are the producers, okay, in that area. And then the organisms consume the plants. Okay, so they are the primary. And then in those process, sa bawat consume, okay, nagkakaroon ng pagpasa-pasa ng energy. So, of course, yung pinakadulo, least na yung energy na nakukuha niya. Okay? So, of course, in an ecosystem, there is limiting factor or what you call the balancing factor, of course. So, too much or too little of any abiotic factor can hinder, okay, can hinder or prevent the growth of a population of species. Siyempre, kapag too much, okay, masama. Kapag masyado namang konti, masama rin because um, they cannot sustain the survival of those organisms present. Okay? I hope naiintindihan yon. And then, yun, nagkakaroon ng energy flow sa ecosystem. That's why there are interactions na nangyayari. So, dito magkakaroon na ng food chain, you have the food web. Okay, ibig sabihin doon na nakikita if sinong predator, sinong prey. Okay, which belongs to the producers and the consumers, and then so much more. Okay? So, walang masasayang. Lahat ng functions sa ecosystems, okay, na isasagawa. Okay. So, we also have the food pyramids. Yun yung sinasabi ko kanina that the energy is being passed on. So, depende if nasa ang trophic level ka. So, of course, yung pinakalas, yun yung pinakakonti na kukuha na energy or as much as possible, sila yung mas nakaka-receive nung pinaka-konting energy. Kasi syempre, an organism consume the plants, which are the producers, and then those organisms use the energy that they obtain. Syempre, kapag kinain na sila, mas konti na rin yung energy. So, this diagram shows you the relations between typical terrestrial organisms. So, if isang tingin lang, medyo magulo siya tingnan. Pero may mga labels kasi siya, colored labels, so that you can know which are secondary consumers, which are primary, and so on. Okay? Okay, so in an ecosystem, we have the organisms, diba? So each organism or the species that are present, they are in category. Okay, they are also different with one another, or they have roles to do. So, number one, we have the native species. The name itself, of course, you know that they are native. Ibig sabihin, sila yung original na taga doon. They normally live and thrive in that ecosystem. We also have the immigrant. Sila yung mga alien species. Ibig sabihin, they migrate. Depende sa needs nila. If napansin nila na hindi na enough yung food or resources dun sa isang area nila, they tend to migrate. Okay? Or to transfer para masustain yung kanilang survival. We have the indicator species. Ibig sabihin, these are species that indicates, okay, they serve as warnings. So, if napansin sa area na yun ay dumadami itong species or kumukonti, ibig sabihin, there is something wrong in that ecosystem. So, it's either nade-degrade na siya or may problem talaga. Okay? So, pwedeng merong mga invasive species, pwedeng ganun. We also have the keystone species. So these are also important species in an environment because they serve as the main source or pwedeng ganon. Pwedeng sila yung main source na as food. Ibig sabihin kapag nawala sila, it can greatly affect the interactions of the organisms in that particular ecosystem. So, pwedeng pag nawala sila, may extinct yung iba. Kasi wala na sila makain. Okay? That is keystone. Okay, so yun nga. As interactions happen dun sa ecosystem, we also have this kind of relationships. Symbiotic relationships na nangyari sa ecosystem. So, we have the parasitism, mutualism, commensalism. Okay, and we also have competitions which are inter or intra-specific. Okay, so predation and parasitism. Of course, alam nyo na yun. Merong prey, merong predator. Okay, so pag prey, yun yung victim. Okay, they are the ones being eaten by the predator. Okay, yun talaga yung role nila. Okay. And yun, we have parasitism. Okay, we have the parasite and the hosts. Mutualism and commensalism. Okay, so pag mutual, alam nyo na yung mutual. So, types of species interaction in which both participating species generally benefit. So, pag mutual, ibig sabihin, pareho kayo nagbe-benefit. Okay, may pakinabang. Pag commensalism naman, yung isa dyan, nagbe-benefit. At yung isa naman, hindi siya nasasaktan at hindi rin siya nagbe-benefit. So, that is commensalism. So, this is an example of that symbiotic relationships of mutualism and commensalism. Okay? Okay, so this is the last slide. So I want to share this principle of the tragedy of the commons. So this is by biologist Hardin. Okay, so sabi is, we are environmentally degrading many openly shared renewable resources. And also, it occurs because each user of a shared common resource ay merong ganitong mindset. So, sabi, if I do not use this resource, someone else will. So the little bit that I use or pollute is not enough to matter in any way. It's a renewable resource. So anyone can decipher this image or this kind of principle or this mindset. How can we relate this to environmental science? Or bakit ko siya sinama dito? Anyone can share? Or you can search, okay? Kung ano yung pagkakaintindi nyo. You can share.